Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining the webinar. We are here today with Northwave and LeaseWeb together. We're showing you what are the risks of hackers and phishing attempts online. We're very happy that you can join us. LeaseWeb and Northwave started working about a year ago, and the demand really came from our customers, and we thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of bring you the knowledge that we gained over the last year and help you protect against the risks that are out there. So a bit of a guideline for what's going to happen in this webinar. First of all, everything is recorded, so we can share with you the recording later, or with those of you that couldn't attend the first webinar. It's going to be shared with you in the next 24 hours, so you can expect that and see really everything that we did today. If you have any questions, please go ahead, submit them through the chat in the question dialog box. We're going to have some interactive events. You're going to see a live hacking attempt, and how that is actually tempered, and we're going to also have some questionnaires coming up. So if you have any questions coming up, don't hold yourself back. Write them in the chat room. We'll be answering them at the end of the webinar. Our two presenters today are Anne and Matthijs. They're from Northwave. They have joined us here today, and they're going to actually give you the rest of the presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to them right now.
So, hi everyone, I'm Matthijs, and next to me is Anne. Before we get started, I'd like to give you a short overview of what Northwave does. And what Northwave does is we stand for intelligent security operations, not only for enterprise organizations, but we think medium to large organizations have the same challenges as the big guys, the multinationals, the government, but sometimes they're lacking in resource and budget. So it's our mission to help you guys build a robust and reliable information security process and make it attainable and obtainable for you as well. How we do this is by offering integrated security services. So we're not just focusing on technology, not just focusing on business, we're focusing on the entire spectrum of security measures. So how we like to call that is bytes, business, and behavior. So we'll go through that in a bit, but just as a short overview, what we call bytes is technical security measures, business helping you install policies, help you with, for example, compliance to ISO certificates, whereas behavior is more focused on things like security awareness, crisis management, etc. Now, I'm going to give the word to Anne.
So let's look at the question, why do cybersecurity incidents hurt so much? It's not just the incident that causes the problem. Most of the time the incident itself has other consequences. Like your bike getting stolen. It's not just the bike that's missing, you need to replace your bike. Or in a cybersecurity incident, a DDoS attack might shut down your business temporarily, and then afterwards you need to clean up. So that cleaning up itself costs money, but maybe you even have to hire people to help you clean up and restore the damage that is done. And of course, there are also consequences that are less tangible, like the consequences to your reputation. Might not be directly visible what the consequences are, but you might lose paying customers, and in the worst case lose money and end up bankrupt, so which of course nobody wants. Besides the security incident itself, we see that in Europe the legislation almost demands an integral security approach. Because if you do not comply, you could get fined, and the fines are very high, even could end up 10% of your turnover. Besides that, you could also get a warning, which is no good for your reputation. So you need to be able to comply to new privacy rules, and you need to be in control and be able to prove that you're in control. And these days, organizations really depend on their data. So to perform your business processes and realize your business objectives, you do need your data. So cybercrime could do real damage. This also means that your data is supposed to be available, accurate, and in some cases has to be treated confidential. That availability makes sure you can perform and get your customers what they want at the right time and get them what they asked for. When it comes to confidentiality, it could be very important that not everybody can access your information, let's say very critical business information or personal data of your employees or even the personal data of your customers. So these days we can actually see data as real assets to an organization, and also the means to access data, your applications and your IT infrastructure. You need all those for continuity and reliability of your business. When, of course, business is not only the only one who have seen how valuable data is. Cybercriminals have also found out data is very valuable and it's quite easy to obtain. So the problem is threats you are facing is you can lose valuable assets, sensitive data and intellectual property could get lost or even be damaged so you can't use it. It might have an impact on your productivity because every incident causes an impact on the way you do your work, and it might damage your reputation. How valuable data is and how relatively easy it is to obtain is also demonstrated by the fact that cybercrime has become the second most economical crime. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Last year it's cost like approximately $218 billion worldwide. And if we look at the developments, we see that attackers are better organized and the attacks become more sophisticated and even more dangerous. In short, it's relatively easy to obtain data illegally, like critical business information or perform digital fraud, for example, through malware. But it's protecting and recovering your data is much more challenging than it used to be because the complexity of your IT landscape. So just take a moment hearing all this to ask yourself, do you have valuable data and what kind of data do you have? Is it personal data or is it data that's critical for your company? And ask yourself, how long can you function without the availability of the data and without the availability of IT? And one that most people don't think of, what happens if the data isn't correct? So what happens if you have to send out, for example, invoices and someone corrupted your data? So far we've been looking at mainly at cybercrime and the consequences of cybercrime, but there's another important development in Europe mainly. It's called the General Data Protection Regulation. It's new European privacy legislation because also the legislative authority have figured out that cybercrime is interesting. So they need to protect European citizens against the misuse of their data, and they demand companies to take appropriate measures so to protect citizens. The European Union tried this by adopting the GDPR, and the primary objectives are to give citizens control over their data, because in the GDPR there are rights for citizens to object if you have data or correct data or see what data you have. And the second objective is mainly for companies that are working within the European Union to simplify the regulatory environment. So there's only one law for the whole European Union instead of special national laws that differ. Now, of course, the interesting question is, what does the European Commission see as personal data? Well, they say that personal data is any information relating to an individual, and it doesn't matter if it refers to private, professional, or the public life. So that can be anything from a name, an email address, to a bank account, and even an IP address of a computer is seen as personal data. So that's a very broad definition, and with personal data, if you have a data breach, it doesn't only affect you as a business, it also affects the person whose data it is. So you have to be extra careful in handling data of others. Of course, the GDPR has an impact on information security. Like we said before, businesses depend on data. So, and to keep your data secure, you have information security. Now, what does the GDPR require? It says you have to have privacy by design, which actually means that when you are designing your business processes and you are designing your IT, you have to keep into account that you're working with personal data and you have to take measures to protect it already when you're designing it. During the life cycle of your business process, application or infrastructure, you have to take appropriate measures. And this is not only technical measures like firewall or IDS and honeypot, but also organizational measures like do you have to have a data protection officer, or do you have a process to report breaches to the supervisory authorities. And of course your data, your security has to help you to be able to detect data breaches, to be able to respond to incidents adequately and in time, to report the breaches within 72 hours and to do forensic research to find out what has happened. So actually the ability to recognize threats and to react properly and in time also affects the consequences of a breach to your organization. And the first step to get to a point where you can actually look at what the threats and vulnerabilities are to identify your critical assets. Not all data, not every application is as critical. And after that, you have to identify the risk and the risk tolerance. What is acceptable for your organization might not be acceptable for another organization, or the other way around. This creates a basis to take preventive measures, but of course, preventive measures aren't everything, because you can never predict what someone is going to do. Maybe are they going to DDoS you, or are they trying to get in your credentials to get into your network? Are they trying a phishing attempt? So you never know what's going on. So that's why monitoring and detection is also very important. Like you can act in time if something goes wrong, if someone got in one way or another. And of course you have to have response and emergency plans and capability to act if an incident actually occurs. And you have to have this in advance, because when something goes wrong, you have to react. You can't wait and think, okay, what am I going to do here and what's the right way to respond. Now we're going to have a little poll, and it's about identity theft. Now the question is, did you ever experience identity theft? And if I'm not mistaken, the poll is open and you can see it. If you would like to reply. Okay, now we get the results. 9% of respondents are very unfortunate and do have experience with identity theft. 59% of people said no, and 32% said not that I'm aware of. Well, no, well, that will be my answer as well, but thinking of what I know now about information security, I'm not certain that I can actually say no, because the problem with identity theft is you hope you never have to experience something like that, but the fact is you never know for sure unless you actually see, well, someone is using your credit card. So that's the problem with cybercrime, is you never know for sure what's going to happen, because it takes time to find out, and some things, well, you never might figure out that it actually happened. So let's hope we never have to experience identity theft, but make sure you're secure with the information. Don't share copies of identity or whatever if you don't know who you're sharing your information with. And now we go over to Matthijs on the subject of intelligent detection and response.
Yes, thank you. So first a little bit about how does a hacker work? What are the steps a hacker takes when trying something malicious? Hacker attacks or hacking attempts can be set against what we call the cyber kill chain. This is a breakdown of some steps that we see pretty much any hacking attempt take. So the first step would be recon. The hacker goes on reconnaissance. He's trying to find the weak spots in your infrastructure, and he's seeing to see what's the best way in. Now we can think of typical vulnerabilities. Maybe there's a unpatched Windows machine somewhere, but you can also think in terms of maybe there's someone who isn't very digitally literate. That could be a very nice way in to start. Next step in the process would be to infect someone. So once again, when we're talking about attacking a person, there could be a phishing email sent. Someone opens an attachment and he's infected. Moving from there, next step would be, after infecting a machine, spreading out. Maybe the first machine someone reached was not the target machine, not the machine where the hacker wanted to end up. So he needs to move to the right position within the network. From there on, usually what happens is we get an initial infectment, there's an exploit of a vulnerability, and from there on the hacker strengthens his position. So basically, he makes a tiny little hole in your defenses and makes it bigger and bigger and bigger and digs himself in. So make sure he has a solid connection back and he's able to work with your systems. Final step would be to exfiltrate, so in other words, to get away with it. Maybe we're looking at someone who's there to steal your data, but the exfiltration step would also be just to destroy your data, depending on what the hacker actually wants to achieve. Now we have all these steps, and what we see is that on average it takes about 145 days to detect a hacking attempt. So that's pretty long. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you a hacking demonstration. So we have a recording of an hacking attempt, and the nice thing is that we can see it from the hacker's perspective as well. And after that I will show you how you could defend against such an attack. So let me quickly start the movie here.
Welcome to the Northwave hacking demonstration. In this demo, we shall demonstrate a realistic hacking scenario from the hacker's perspective. Right now, we're looking at Kali Linux. Kali Linux is an operating system, just like, for example, Microsoft Windows. It comes preloaded with all kinds of hacking tools that we can use to get started. The second screen we have is a regular Windows machine. This is the victim's machine. In this scenario, it belongs to Hotel The Little Sun. As we so often see, there is a My Documents folder. Let's open it. And the My Documents folder contains, among other things, an administration folder that has some Excel files, etc. Also, there is a bookings file, and that contains some credit card numbers that belong to certain reservations or bookings that have been made. Of course, we have email as well. There's an internet browser, and we even have a virus scanner. In this case, it's AVG. Going back to the hacker system, what can we do? To attack the victim, we could send, for example, a malicious email. This email can contain an attachment, and the attachment can contain malware. And this malware is something we can use to control the victim's computer system. Now that's actually a pretty common scenario nowadays, attachments that contain viruses and malware. And of course normally we can't see what happens behind the scenes, but today we will be able to show you something from how the hacker operates. So to get going, I will be starting Metasploit. A Metasploit is a tool, or actually a framework, let's start it right now, that a hacker can use to start all kinds of processes on victim's PC. So what we did now is we started a so-called listener, and this listener waits until a connection is made from the victim system. The connection does not make itself, of course, from the victim system. We first have to get a malicious piece of software to run on the victim's PC. So how could we go about this? We will send them an email, like I said, and to do that we have a couple of files. Let's browse them. So as you can see, we have a file called cv.pdf.exe. This looks like a basic CV, but because we use a double extension, the last part will fall off for normal Windows users, for a Windows machine that's configured as it is by default. So a victim will just see a PDF file, and as an email we will use the following text, someone applying to the function the role of desk worker or receptionist. So what will we do? We're going to send an email saying as a subject application to the information address of the Little Sun Hotel containing the body and a zip file with the attachment. So let's send it, and that's done. Let's go back to the victim's PC. Launching Outlook. Let's see if we have new messages. Yep, we do. And it's by Thomas Anderson. Let's see. Dear Sir, Madam, I'd like to apply to the position of receptionist. In the attachment you can find my CV and solicitation letter, or application letter actually. Let's open it up. Yep, there's a PDF file, and as you can see, the .exe part fell off. Let's save it to the desktop. Yep, let's open it up. Sure. Oh, that's a pretty nice looking CV. And everything looks normal. So as you probably noticed, we clicked OK on some warnings, but this is something a user is very likely to do. There's not that many people that actually read these warnings, right? So everything looked normal. We saw the CV. Continue with work. But when we get back to the hacker system, we see that a session has started on our listener, because of course that PDF file actually contained our malware. Now that this session is opened, we can go back to it and we can start controlling it. So now we start interaction, and there's some things we can do. Let's start with making a screen print of the victim's PC. So we can see what is happening on his screen. And this is the first, well, to get an overview of what kind of system are we looking at. Is it Windows? What files are there on the desktop? Is it the target PC, or do we have to move to another PC in a bit? So that's what we see now. But what we can also do, for example, is search for files on the file system. So let's search for anything that mentions the word credit card. So we got one result. On the file system we found in the My Documents folder a file that is called creditcardsbookings.xlsx, and I'd like to have that file, I think. So let's download it. Oh, what's this? Cannot find the path specified. Oh, I see, I made a typo. I put the wrong username in. So let's quickly edit my download script. Change the username. Yep. And there we are, we have the file. Let's open it up. And see there, we have the file containing all the credit card numbers of our victims' customers. And that's a pretty bad thing to do, or to have, of course. Of course, there are some more possibilities as well. We could, for example, start the webcam, and that might yield some interesting results as well. But something else we could do is to start a so-called keylogger. So let's do that. And a keylogger is an application that sniffs out all keystrokes that a victim performs, saves them, and is later on allows you to play them back. And it's typically used to sniff out someone's password. So now the keystroke sniffer is running. Let's go back to the victim's PC and let's open the web browser. And let's go to the Dutch government's DigiD page. And DigiD is the sign-on environment for the Dutch government. So it's pretty likely something a business owner would do this, to do taxes, for example. So log in, username Jan Janses, pretty Dutch name of course, and typing in the very long password, because longer is safer. Right? And we've logged in. Nothing to see here. And there is nothing to see here because we're not interfering with anything. We're just reading out the keystrokes and not messing with the user in any way. But going back to the hacker's machine, we can just download all the keystrokes. So now we see everything that Jan Jansen inputted. See his username, then he pressed tab, and then he entered his password, superveilig wachtwoord 123, meaning super secure password 123. So what we've just shown you is just a quick example of some of the things a hacker can do using not very sophisticated tools. These are all just available to download. And to me what's pretty interesting is that the victim has no clue what happened. There's no obvious signs of something being wrong. We're not interfering with his DigiD yet, but of course later on the hacker is able to do so. So everything seems to work normally, but by now the hacker has complete control of the victim system. This concludes our hacking demonstration for now.
But before we do that, we have another poll coming up. How did you react to a recent phishing attempt? I'm looking at the results here. If you could all please vote. So have you ever experienced a phishing attempt? Some possible answers: yes, and you deleted it directly because you immediately recognized it. Yes, or you just realized after clicking the link. Or no, never experienced an attempt. Alright, let's see the results. So most of you immediately realized it. Some of you realized after clicking, and some of you never even experienced a phishing attempt, which is pretty nice. Well, I'm going to be honest here. A couple of months ago, I got sent an email by Apple, and usually the first sign is, well, the language is all wrong. There's all kinds of errors in the spelling, all kinds of signs. But this one, I went pretty far with it. I was ready to click on the renew my password link, and then I thought, hey, well, this is not leading to apple.com in this example, but this is leading to a weird domain. So almost fell for it. It can happen to anyone. But yeah, it's something that's always good to keep in mind when getting unsolicited emails.
And they're getting better and better at the attempts they do, so you have to be very, very aware because, like you just said, it looks very real.
Indeed. So like I said before, getting back to the kill chain and how you can actually use this kill chain to strengthen your defenses, because as I showed you before, and actually I hope you recognize some of the steps in the hacking video. Recon would have been done a little bit before the video. Maybe someone has put up a job ad and the hacker decided to react. Infection, you saw that happen, etc. So what is important to know is that at each of these phases you can disrupt the hacker. And the hacker has to go through pretty much all of these phases every time he tries something. So if you cut him off at recon, or you cut him off at the infecting stage, the entire attempt stops. So this gives you lots of opportunities to cut him off. Now this is something that Northwave wants to help with, and for that we have devised our intelligent detection and response services. So how do we do this? Imagine on the left side of the screen is your business, your assets. Could be your servers hosted here at LeaseWeb. Could also be your desktop machines, your laptops, all kinds of assets. And on the right side of the screen we have ourselves. What we do is we guard all those of your assets using our detection platform, and I'll dive into that after in a bit. This is on what we call the bytes level, so technical measures to help you defend against hacking attempts. Because it's also about not just carting in a technical solution, it's always about aligning this with your needs. So if necessary, our security operations center, they monitor the alerts that come up from our detection platform, and depending on what the situation is, how important an alert is, or the severity level of an alert, we can notify your IT team. And once again, there's of course always different types of assets. Your server might be more important to you than your mobile phone, for example. But for other business, it might be the other way around. Of course, also on the business level, we have our customer service manager talking to your CISO, your Chief Information Security Officer, helping you report on the state of security and maybe point out what are some improvements we could make. So not just having a firewall that defends against things, not just having something that alerts, but we're actively going to help you see what are some vulnerabilities, what are the things we need to address. Then, should there be an incident and it's not something your own IT team knows how to handle, because like Anna said earlier, there's all kinds of requirements in the law on, for example, forensics, on log management, etc. We can escalate to our CERT team, Computer Emergency Response Team. That's what it stands for. Always on standby, and we can help you not only mitigate an incident, but also help on following up. So keeping logs in such a way that it can be used later on in court, for example. Now to get into a bit of the bytes. As you saw on the previous slide, we have the Northwave detection platform that we use to guard your assets. This is done using a SIEM solution. A SIEM stands for Security Information and Event Manager. So this is something that watches your network flow, watches your PCs, your desktop PCs, watches your hosts, so servers as well, Basically, it sits there looking for well, fishy things happening. For example, to give you a bit of an idea, it does what we know as a log correlation, meaning, for example, if you see 1,000 login attempts, they all fail. Well, sounds safe, right? Someone tried to break in, didn't work. But maybe then after those 1,000 failed attempts, suddenly there's a successful attempt. So that could mean that someone was trying to brute force his way into your server, your infra, and after the 1,000th time, he managed to get in. So these are all some examples of what a SIM could do for you. SIM also takes care of the log retention management, which gives us a nice base for our forensic research. So this is something that you could plug into your server rack, and of course Northwave helps you set it up. For that we have our Security Operations Center. They watch alerts from coming in from your SIM, and by the way, if you would run a SIM on-premise on your own infra, your data never leaves your own environment. Only alerts are going to be forwarded to us, to Northwave, to triage and analyze them. So after, of course, there's some initial calibration of the SIM. I get a baseline, what's happening there, and then the SOC is always there to analyze anything that might happen. We provide some other services from the SOC as well, from the Security Operations Center. Help the Change Advisory Board, for example. And like we said before, we always want to help improve your security. So for example, what would happen is when you just install the SIM, is we scan your environment, what kind of assets do you have in there, and what is important to you to guard. Do you want to guard everything? Are you interested in just your servers, for example? Maybe you have some point of sales equipment that you would like to protect as well. So it's always about what are your needs in security. And like I said, some overview of our computer emergency response team. Always available 24/7. We can not just respond to incidents as they happen, but we also help you set up plans in advance, because, well, if there's a plan lying on the shelf, it's always easier to respond to an incident happening than just running around having no idea what to do. Having a plan always helps. And like we said, you don't have to take all of them at once. If you want to handle your own incidents, for sure, but we're always there to help. So to give you a quick overview of some of the service levels that we offer, there's the bronze level, which is basically like a do-it-yourself service. We deliver, of course, our detection platform. We help you calibrate it, and you are at the screens yourself. And you, of course, can also fall back during office hours to our Security Operations Center for some extra expertise. But it's your own in-house security team that sits behind the wheel. Another option is our gold level, the follow the sun, full-time, full-blown, 24/7. All alerts are always triaged by us and forwarded to your IT operation. And of course, from your end, that would require actually to have an IT operation that's active 24/7 as well. So let's meet in the middle there at the silver level. Northwave does permanent monitoring and immediate permanent monitoring, but immediate response is to critical alerts. So together we define what is a critical alert to me, and once again this can depend on the asset that is being attacked, but it can also be dependent on what is happening. Maybe if you have a certain server and the system sees that there's a vulnerability, is this something you want to be called for in the middle of the night? If so, then sure, and if not, we'll let you know the next morning. So that's always something that we can agree on together. So yeah, that's the meet in the middle approach there. So is this something you're interested in exploring further? You can always just contact your LeaseWeb rep, your LeaseWeb support, and from there on we can get something, we can get a conversation going. So concluding, I hope we were able to give you a nice overview of some requirements by law and a short overview of how hackers actually work. And I think we now have some time for some questions.
All right, so maybe I can help you guys with questions and you guys can answer them. So we have a question from Nancy Vermeer. She's asking, sorry, once again, what does GDPR stand for? What does the abbreviation stand for?
GDPR stands for the General Data Protection Regulation, which is the new European Union's privacy legislation, in short.
Okay, and that's only for Europe, or is that?
That's for Europe, and that's interesting about the GDPR is for everybody who has online activities and targets Europeans. So
Okay.
It's not just for European businesses, but for all businesses that target European citizens, which makes it quite interesting.
And these are regulations that are already now, or these are planned to come out soon?
They're in force already, and you're obligated to comply next year, the 25th of May.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it probably takes some preparation. So this will apply to all companies in the European Union?
Yeah.
And that's something that you need to start at least checking and see that you can
Yeah.
apply to those.
Yeah, I should start already by checking if you already comply.
Okay. All right. Well, we have another, Stefan van Oorschot said, oh, I gave the wrong answer. I definitely experienced attempts, phishing attempts it is, but deleted immediately. I still have some nice examples in my inbox. Well, Stefan, if you can send those to us, we always like to see nice phishing examples, and there are some really good ones in there. I'm really surprised to hear there are some people that didn't experience them. I hope you just didn't know that you were experiencing them and that you didn't click them, because, yeah, sometimes they're very hard to recognize. Good. Do we have any more questions? Okay. More and more people use cloud services from extended vendors next to their own IT. However, GDPR seems to require tailor-made agreements. That doesn't seem to mix well with standard terms of service for most cloud services. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, that is what is difficult about GDPR, because they act like you get a tailor-made agreement with a cloud provider. But what you have to look at is, well, most professional cloud providers are quite aware of the fact that they have to have good security, because their business is good security, because they are guarding your data. So what you have to look at is if the standard agreement is okay with you, because some providers have very good agreements where security is okay. Well, they've embedded security in their solution very well. And sometimes, well, some providers do not care about security at all. Or very little providers. So you have to look at the provider each time to see, is this a provider that is fitting my needs, that is protecting my data the way I would like to protect it.
Yeah, so when choosing a cloud provider, it's not enough to look for price or flexibility or agility. This is a very important factor to also look into and to definitely ask about.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know a top 5 tools every individual needs to protect themselves from, maybe even if not a company, just an individual?
Well, that's a pretty difficult question to ask, because it all depends on one's environment. But in general, I'd say definitely get a virus scanner. This doesn't just go for Windows machines, but also for Mac machines. There isn't that many malware yet for Apple computers, but it's definitely up and coming. And also for mobile devices, it's definitely up and coming. But to give a general top 5 tools, that would be kind of hard, because it all depends on what we're defending. Are we defending a server, a mobile phone, or a laptop?
I guess there are also a lot of phishing attempts that target private people and not only companies, right? So this is maybe something we don't look at here when we work with companies, but that's also something a lot of people can actually experience.
Yeah, sure.
So we have another question from Youssef, who's asking, what about zero-day vulnerabilities affecting web or server apps? Your solution at Northwave, can that actually mitigate that type of attacks?
Yes and no. There's two things we can do here. The Northwave detection platform also makes use of what is known as threat intelligence. Threat intelligence is trying to gain information about exploits before they come publicly known, which is of course what being a zero-day is about. So that could be one way we already know about a zero-day exploit. Another way would be heuristics. So like the example I gave before, 1,000 login attempts that are failed, suddenly a successful one, that's kind of weird. So that's independent of the actual vulnerability used. So that could be another way to detect that. And there's more examples of how we could detect that as well. But of course, it's going to stay a risk, that's for sure.
Okay. Rick McCoon is asking, do you have any managed or unmanaged solutions for endpoint vulnerability scanning? For example, checking workstation, update solutions like a WSUS?
This is indeed within the detection platform. It comes also with an endpoint security solution. So yeah, short answer is yes.
All right. From Nenad, we have a question. What is hardware requirements for your platform? So what do you expect from companies to actually have?
That's a pretty good question. That's also pretty much dependent on how much assets do you want to guard. It's dependent on the number of events per second that the platform would have to process. So if you have 200 servers that need to be protected, that's obviously going to be more in terms of hardware requirements than if you just want to protect 5 servers.
But there is additional hardware required to protect a setup like that?
You can run it on metal, but indeed you can also run it as a virtual machine. So no, not necessarily.
And do customers need to adapt to that additional hardware, or is that something that you provide? How does it actually work?
We would provide it. We would help you select the right equipment. And we would, of course, guide you in implementing the hardware in your infrastructure.
Okay. Good. I don't see any more questions. So yeah, I think we'll wrap it up. You'll have an opportunity to see our contact details if we go to the next slide. You can see some information there. Great. Thank you very much for being part of our presentation. We have some lovely snowflakes prepared for you here. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, all social media channels. You have my email here. Any questions, feel free to send them over. Anne and Matthijs will receive them immediately. And we look forward to be in touch. Thank you very much for being part. Thank you, Anne and Matthijs. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.